What's up, folks? Casual Dad here, and I want to do a real quick video where I talk about how to spend your wild cards. And this is my second take because the first time I wasn't particularly happy with it, but it was a really good time to do like a test run of what I was going to say. And then also we got a surprise announcement this week, or this last week at the time that I published this, updating us on how maxed cards are going to work. Now, I'm going to go ahead and leave some of you sweating and not open this pack. We'll get back to that. But so, what are wild cards? So wildcards are newish random drops that will drop cards of either a rarity and or a faction, and then you can spend these to upgrade any card that is either that matches that rarity or matches that rarity and that faction. So this can upgrade any common card, this and I can put 19 copies into it, and this can upgrade any rare card in Chaos. And then just to kind of look at how we use these, well, actually here. So again, they're in your collection tab. You can click here. You can also view them from an actual card. So let's see, Tolmeron, for example. There's a wildcard button here I can use to look at them and see what I could use to upgrade him. Now, in terms of the question of how to spend these, so it's really tempting to just spend them. And I'm going to try to give the best advice I possibly can, even if it's advice I don't particularly follow. So my first piece of advice on how to spend your wildcards is don't. That's it. Sit on these as long as you possibly can, because the more of them you use, the more diminishing returns you're going to get. Because wildcards are not random, but card drops are. And it's really unlikely you're ever going to have enough wildcards to really level something up to a higher level. And so you could dump 2 legendary wildcards into a card and then not get another drop for that for months. So you do want to be sparing with these. You really only want to spend them when you actually have a level to gain, or if you have a specific thing that you're putting these into and you know no matter what I get, no matter how many I get, I'm going to put it into this card because this is the card I want maxed. So those are the 2 ways to look at it, and which one you choose or which one is better for you is going to vary a lot on your level. So typically, one of the big pieces of advice I would give new players is that you want to get all of your cards that you play up to trait rank 3. And that is, you're looking right there. You want that kind of double flower symbol on your, or double laurels symbol on your trait, which is trait level 3, 3rd rank of that trait. And so this is what it looks like on a rare. Let's go ahead and drop onto these. This is going to be a common. And then we've got a epic, anywhere, epic, right there. And then, of course, legendaries looks very similar. So you want to get to trait rank 3 with all of your cards that you play. What you're going to find is the majority of your collection gets to that fairly quickly. With drops, with upgrades, there's a decent slope there to where the number of cards you need to upgrade doesn't get too high, and your drops are still pretty good. So you can use wildcards to get there, but I don't necessarily recommend that. But that's kind of where you want to get. And then after that, progression slows dramatically, and you want to be very, very careful where you progress from there. So just kind of some general points. If you look for campaigns specific to your faction, and maybe they have a free reward that's actually the card you want, and look for a clan dedication that's that specific cat faction, those are all ways you can kind of steer your collection towards a specific narrow band, level more aggressively. And if you have 1, maybe 2 factions that are aggressively leveled, you'll progress in the game dramatically faster because you can get to Terra and the upper levels of the competitive ladder. You can compete in at least some of the campaigns, which will give you some more free rewards, and will not only net you copies of cards from the faction you're playing as, but also the faction you're playing against. So you get kind of a double win there where you do expand 2 factions at once with only having 1 strong faction. It does give you the extra flexibility having 2 strong factions, so I do really recommend starting out with 2 strong factions rather than just 1, and certainly not all 9. That will slow you down a lot. You can do it, but it'll slow you down a lot. So the kind of change in rules that we got announced from the developers the other day that I mentioned earlier also changes this too. It actually encourages you to be even more focused, because what they changed is that if you get a card to max level, boop, and then if you get any additional drops for that card, it will then give you plasma based on the rarity of this card. So let me actually pull this up while I'm talking, and I can take a look at the actual numbers. And that'll take me just a second, so I'll keep talking while I'm at it. What that encourages you to do is level up as many cards as you can to max, and especially your common cards. This is really cool. It gives you a huge incentive to actually get max level common cards, because commons have really common drops. So even though they have the lowest possible drop rate of plasma, you're going to get the most of them. So if you have a dozen or so max level common cards, you're going to start getting a pretty nice steady stream of plasma just coming into your collection as you open packs. And looking at the numbers, a copy of a max level common card. So a copy of a max level card. If you have it at max level, you get an extra copy. Common will give you 3 plasma, a rare will give you 10 plasma, epic 20, and a legendary 100. So that means that you get the most plasma possible if you get extra copies of legendary drops. But legendaries, there are enough legendary cards in the game, and they're hard enough to level that it's really unlikely that you're going to get that 100 plasma. Likewise for epic, even less. That 20, it is 80 less plasma per copy for epic than it is for legendary. So that's really going to hurt. And again, there's so many cards in here where if you get a legendary or epic drop, chances are it's not going to be the one that's going to net you that plasma until you have a lot of max level cards. Whereas with commons, common drops are so common that once you have a couple max level commons, that should be a decent steady stream of plasma into your collection, which is cool. Oh, look at that. Yeah, so you really want to max as many commons as you can now. And a quick side note on that, my personal favorite, and this, they redesigned the store. Man, so much to talk about. Okay, store is redesigned with fewer tabs. Very nice. The For You tab now has the card shop that I know and love. And my personal favorite way to spend gold, one of my favorite ways to level cards, is whenever a common drops in this shop, spend the 50 gold to get the 5 copies. Super efficient use of your resources. We'll level those commons much more quickly at low level, and then we'll continue to level them up more quickly higher on as well. It's great. Really appreciate that because you can pick and choose. It lets you choose to sink coins into the ones that are close to leveling, or sink into the kind of lower level ones that you need to get up. Like this guy is minus very low, and I really appreciate having this, even though I'm now out of gold. I really want to get this guy to trait rank 3, and it's taken a minute to do it. So another thing I did want to go ahead and talk about. So just to recap, the idea is to hold on to your wild cards as long as you can. You want to hold them until you're sure they're going to be useful. And that guaranteed level is really helpful. Let's look at those legendaries in the collection again. And this is all your legendaries. So looking at this screen of legendaries, right? So I could drop 2 legendaries into Onva, my 2 legendaries. Say I have a Tau and a Wild. Put them into Onva, and then all of a sudden I get drops for all of these other cards and don't get another random legendary card. Again, it could be months before I get another Tau legendary wild card, a drop of Onva, or a wild legendary card. Now, there are now 3 ways to get legendary copies of Onva, which is really nice, but those are also, it is also 3 ways to get legendary copies of any legendary warlord in the game, or rather any legendary card in the game. So while it does allow you to level up specific cards more quickly, not enough that you want to be sprinkling these around. You want to be very sure about how you're going to spend them. And to kind of illustrate that a little bit, I wanted to highlight the cards that I personally am leveling up aggressively, starting with the ones that I'm putting both my faction wildcards and then also my wild wildcards into. And the first one out of that is going to be the Chaos Sorcerer. I got to clear the search. And that's going to be this guy right here. Now, he's epic, and epic cards start with a primary trait, but then their real power really unlocks when they get that secondary trait. So, and they also, card drops are very slow, and they have a decent number of copies of a card per level. So epic cards tend to progress extremely slowly. Because of the number of copies required, I have found personally that my epics tend to actually progress more slowly than my legendaries. It's wild. So legendary or epics also have this giant power spike at level 8, or excuse me, level 9, when they unlock that secondary trait. Now, it's going to vary a lot epic by epic because it's only trait rank 1 until you max the thing. But some traits are so good, it really matters. And one of the top ones up there is going to be that Psionic Blast to go with that poison. This thing is insanely powerful. And this one is an interesting case too, because if you played in the campaigns a few months back, you got it at level 5. So it started here. So since then, since the end of those campaigns and the release of wildcards, I've gained 2 levels plus a couple copies. So that does show you both how much faster the progression is for this, but also how slow it still is too. So that's why it's very important to be very precious with your wildcards and to be focused on what you're upgrading, especially for epics. Now, this one fills a real need in my Chaos decks, having that area effect psychic damage, having the area effect poison. He's a really good backup to the chicken. being the defining card of the entire Chaos faction. And if you have this guy and that Psychic Poison Barrage in your deck, it's a very, very gnarly deck and very powerful to get through. Now, if you don't have a decent level of this guy, this would be my call for where to put your Chaos Wild Legendary cards. But I'm doing this a little bit differently. My Epic cards are going into that Sorcerer. My Epic Wild cards are going into that Sorcerer. So he is my primary focus for all of my Epic cards. And then my Legendaries are going into Supreme Commander Abaddon. That's where I'm going to go ahead and put those because I really enjoy him, but he really struggles at that price point at that level. So I really want to sink those levels into him and kind of build him up a little bit. And it's a pretty easy choice to make early on. Talking about low-level players, talking about cards that are early on, I put one card into this and it gets me a level. It's not wasted right out of the gate. Even if at that point I decide to change my mind to another legendary, that's really helpful in his case, especially since that one level is up health, which is one of the things he's most lacking. Ideally, I want to get at least 2 levels in there, get him that rank 3 fear. If I can keep going up, obviously he's just going to keep getting better. And he's a really fun warlord, so I'll probably start doing that, but that's still up in the air. But the best advice would be pick a legendary, sink your wildcards into it for a while until you get it to a decent level, and then kind of revisit. And before I was putting them into Abaddon, just because I liked him so much, I put them into this guy. Also gained 2 levels. So once you're sinking your wildcards into these things, the progression is pretty similar or comparable between a epic and a legendary. So this guy has gone from level 5 to level 7. So is my epic. He's unlocked his secondary trait. So this is his level 2 of his secondary trait being a legendary. So this is where I could really kind of take a pause and see if I want to keep leveling him, because it gets to be significantly more copies per level at this stage. So I could stop with him and switch to another one. That's right around where I would recommend reconsidering or reviewing if you want to get these up. And just like with that Sorcerer, once I unlock that secondary trait rank 1, get him to level 9, I'm probably going to switch to something else just because the investment is absolutely massive to get him beyond that. A couple other examples of cards that I would do that with if I didn't have them at that level already. Morvenn Ra. This again is going to be a little bit of an echo of my faction-defining cards, because those, of course, are cards that you want. So getting Morvenn Ra to level 9, if you play Eldari at all, if you're unsure what to do with your epic Eldari wild cards, Morvenn Ra is insane in any range deck with Eldari, which Eldari really love, and that secondary trait of Barrage combos so well with his stat line, his cost, the warlord traits he runs with. It's incredible. And again, it's one of those cases where level 1 is enough to make a dramatic impact. So definitely do that. And then with your legendaries, for Eldari, I believe what I've been doing, you can put them into the avatar if you want to go that way, but I've been putting them into the super heavies that I have. So this guy's the one that I'm really leveling up because he's just super fun. Not very good at 200 points, which is where you're using him the most, but you know, it's cool enough that I just want to use him, and that's what I'm doing there. So I don't necessarily recommend doing that, but it's what I'm doing with those. So we're going to hop around a little bit. I don't want to give advice on every single card, which may be a little bit disappointing because you want advice on where to spend these, right? But everyone's collection is so unique. What you're playing is so unique. What builds you're playing. Even though there are some consistent builds, it's really difficult to give advice that'll actually apply to everyone. So before I talked about those faction-defining cards, that still stands. Those are definitely the ones that you want to do. So like Morvenn Ra, Jane Czar, the Howling Banshee Phoenix Lord, Simet, and the Sun Eater? The Sun Eater, yeah. Simet and the Sun Eater. Long Strike, for sure, for your legendaries. And for your epics, what would you do with your epics? That's a tougher choice. Maybe these two or Shaz O, the Warlord. Or maybe her. She's a phenomenal stats for a Medicae on her. She's a great epic. For commons and rares, it is so much harder to say. It depends on what's in your collection, what needs to be leveled, what you kind of enjoy playing with. There's a lot harder to give good advice on that, except now with the changes to those plasma drops for max level cards, I would really recommend focusing with your common and your rare wild cards the same as you do with your epic legendaries, much more strongly than I would have before. Before I would have said sprinkle those as much as you want because they're much more common. You have a lot of them. You'll have a lot of cards you need to level. It doesn't hurt to just spend those. But now with those plasma drop changes, I would focus on your commons too. So as you're spending these, focus on your high level cards, like my 12 over here. look at your cards that are closest to max and devote your wild cards to them, and you should find that you actually fairly quickly max out some of your common and rare cards too, because the common wild card drops are pretty frequent, and so you should be fairly able to drop stuff in here. Let's see, how many do I have here? Oh yeah, only 3 for faction though. Ooh, I spent some of those. Let's see, and then servants. Yeah, I'm not going to recap, but that but yeah, so look for ones you can level. Look for your highest level cards, the ones you use the most in the factions you use the most. I will take a minute to talk about the card in here that I'm doing. And this is the one that's getting my Servants of the Emperor epic cards. And this has quite a few options. But this guy is one of the faction defining cards I would definitely do. The kind of unusual one that I really want, and this one too. Okay, so for your epics, these two are very easy choices as really, really good ones to level up with your wild cards. And that's a little bit different than what I was saying in my faction defining cards, because this one's somewhat newer and being epic didn't make the cut before. But if you're spending wild cards, this is an excellent choice. For me, I'm putting him into this guy. I've seen this guy at max level, and Deadshot is a really useful trait. So I really want this guy to be kind of the cornerstone of my Creed decks. So I'm leveling that guy up really aggressively, and that's where my Servants of the Emperor copies are going, in part just because I really want to see him get powered up, and also in part because the cards that I would really kind of lean on already are level 9. So the epics I have are already at levels where I don't need to sink points into them that aggressively. Precision shot, that's a nice one. So there are some places I could still use some, but I'm trying to be very focused and disciplined about putting them into Umbral 6. Now, this one I got at level 1. And I got him around the same time I got the 2 that you get at level 5. So you can see his progression's been faster, but still faster level per level, but his total progression is dramatically lower. So I'm not spending my wild cards on him. I'm only spending my faction wild cards on him. And he didn't start at as high a level. So he is leveling up to a reasonable point very quickly. This is right where I would consider actually putting him into a deck. Before then, no. Here, iffy. Get to there, and then it starts to get real fun. And then, of course, getting into level 9 and above, he becomes just a terrifying piece. Yeah. So there's one there. Those are the ones that I've really settled on. For most of the other factions, I haven't really picked one yet. Particularly Votann, I'm really holding on to those as best I can. And then Tyranids, this has been very tricky because this is a card I really love and one I want to level up, and I'm actually close to maxing. But this is one where I really want to get that secondary trait for. We'll get there. So this is kind of the struggle of trying to spend these. And that's another reason why I say hold your wild cards. Just go ahead and repeat it again. Because when you spend them, they're gone. But if you hold them, you may suddenly have a moment of clarity where you're like, this is the card I want. Or you get another drop where you want that card. You stumble upon a deck that you absolutely love. Like there are a lot of things you could do that would make you kind of realize a little bit more clearly what you actually want to level up with your wild cards. And that's why you want to have them on hand. So I would spend a couple here and there, especially if you have some extra legendary ones and you have a legendary warlord, especially maybe one card away from leveling. Go ahead and spend it there. But when possible, hold on to those until you have a really clear idea of what you want to spend it on. And that's going to be unique to your collection and your playstyle. So it's not a question that someone else can really answer comfortably. Hopefully I've helped put a little bit of framework behind my thought process, why I'm leveling up the cards I am, and why I'm kind of taking this approach. Maybe that's helpful for you too. We'll see. I don't know. We'll keep this relatively short. Hopefully this was fun. And yeah, let me know if you have any other questions.